audiences gravitated to the scores of articles and cable news segments about Donald J. Trump, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal for an undeniable reason: sex sells. But there was something more important lurking beneath the salacious surface of the stories about the president's alleged past encounters with a porn star and a former Playboy model. People who followed the sagas quickly learned that they were in for more than lurid details. Like one of those prestige television series on Netflix, FX, HBO or Showtime, the tale started off sleazy but ventured into weightier thematic territory as it unfolded. Enriching the narrative was Michael D. Cohen, who worked for Mr. Trump as factotum and fixer. He was part villain, part flunky. NOW in the role of converted truth-teller for an audience of federal prosecutors. Mr. Cohen admits he was given a very big job: shut those two women up on the eve of the 2016 presidential election. He pulled it off, for a time, at least, with hush money payments involving a hastily created Delaware shell company and the Trump-friendly tabloid news company that owns the National Enquirer, American Media Incorporated. The stories were tawdry, and the news coverage sometimes veered toward clickbait, but there were important questions hiding beneath the sheets. Has the presidential election process become so cynical that players in a campaign can surreptitiously blow through legal limits on spending to deceive the public? Are they free to coordinate with a media organization that behaved in a manner antithetical to the role the founders envisioned for a free press by paying to hide information about a presidential candidate rather than share it with the public? On Friday, federal prosecutors in New York answered those questions with a resounding no. In making their stand against Mr. Cohen, they were arguing for the legitimacy of United States campaign finance law, which, for all its loopholes, may have some teeth, after all, and for the value of truth and transparency in campaigns. Mr. Cohen has pleaded guilty to 2 sets of criminal campaign violations by secretly paying Ms. Daniels $130,000 for her silence in October 2016. He was flouting the law that limits individual campaign contributions to $2,700 in a general election. And by arranging for the Enquirer's parent company to squelch Ms. McDougal's affair accusation by buying the exclusive rights to her story for $150,000 and then sitting on it, a practice known in the tabloid trade as catch and kill. Mr. Cohen was inducing AMI to violate a law that prohibits corporations from spending any money in campaigns in coordination with candidates or their agents. When prosecutors proposed a substantial prison sentence for Mr. Cohen on Friday, they cited those violations ahead of other crimes to which he has pleaded guilty, including tax evasion and lying to Congress. Cohen's commission of 2 campaign finance crimes on the eve of the 2016 election for President of the United States struck a blow to one of the core goals of the federal campaign finance laws: transparency, the prosecutors wrote in the sentencing memo. While many Americans who desired a particular outcome to the election knocked on doors, toiled at phone banks, or found any number of other legal ways to make their voices heard, Cohen sought to influence the election from the shadows. People following the yarn may not have expected that a story centered on a porn star and a one-time Playboy model would end up with prosecutorial paeans to American ideals. But here we are. Prosecutors suggested Mr. Cohen was taking the rap for a crime that included others in higher places. They asserted that Mr. Trump, called Individual 1 in legal filings, had directed him to engage in the cover-ups, implicating the president in felony campaign finance violations. Justice Department guidelines protect sitting presidents from indictments. But as the New York Times reported Sunday, prosecutors believe they can bring charges against Mr. Trump if he does not win again in 2020. The prosecutor's memo also indicated that others in Mr. Trump's circle may have been involved in the payments. So the plot could thicken if the prosecutors, led by the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Robert S. Khuzami, pursue more charges. Then there's American Media Inc. Prosecutors assert that the company's payment to Ms. McDougal was an illegal corporate contribution. They had already determined over the summer that the Enquirer's parent was effectively acting as an adjunct of the Trump campaign. But they may never lodge charges against the company or its employees, given that the AMI chairman, David J. Pecker, a close friend of Mr. Trump, has cooperated with the investigation. Still, the investigators have made a powerful statement about what was a twisted use of journalism in an election. Generations of journalists have felt called to the profession seeing a high mission in finding out all there is to know about the men and women who asked to be voted into the nation's highest office. For those who wonder why any of this might apply to the Inquirer, I would direct them to the supermarket tabloid's recent history of presidential muckraking. It was the Inquirer that, in 2007 and 2008, discovered that the Democratic presidential candidate John Edwards had conceived a child out of wedlock with a woman who worked for his campaign, Real Hunter. The tabloid exposed an elaborate scheme in which Mr. Edwards, using money from his political patrons, covered his tracks by having a campaign aide pose as the baby's father. It was the kind of story the Inquirer was made for. It used reporting techniques that mainstream news organizations wouldn't dare, like a dumpster dive for the baby's diaper, for DNA testing, to pierce Mr. Edwards' facade as a devoted husband. That dirt digging was fully in keeping with the tabloid media tradition of going all out to give the powerless a glimpse of what the powerful are hiding. And it led to a landmark campaign finance case against Mr. Edwards that, while ultimately unsuccessful, set the template for the one that is implicated individual one. By 2016, things had changed. During the campaign cycle, the Inquirer functioned more like a protection racket. According to prosecutors, the tabloid became part of the very sort of scheme it had once reveled in exposing, and it crossed the line into illegality when it spent money, allegedly in coordination with Mr. Trump, to protect his reputation. AMI issued angry denial after angry denial to the Times and other news organizations that pursued the story, including the Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker and the Washington Post. Those denials dried up in August when prosecutors declared that the payment to Ms. McDougal was an unlawful corporate contribution. The company declined to comment over the weekend. The Inquirer's behavior was part of a broader trend in which various branches of the news media were used to distort the public debate, a corruption of mission that turned parts of the political arena into information junkyards. Even Russian nationals got into the act, buying advertisements on Facebook that were packed with misinformation and paying in rubles. United States law prohibits foreign spending in elections, yet nothing came of it. It was easy to understand, then, why so many pundits were skeptical that federal prosecutors would pursue a case related to the hush money deals involving Ms. Daniels and Ms. McDougal. Across the television news networks, the experts expressed doubt that anything would result from what was referred to as just a campaign finance violation. Beneath their words was a world-weary knowingness. Wasn't this how the game was played? On Friday, the law answered back. The path of Stormy Daniels' $130,000 payment to keep quiet. Here are the knowns, unknowns and contradictions of the not-so-secret payment to the pornographic film actress. It may prove to be the most talked-about secret payment in American political history, the $130,000 that President Trump's lawyer Michael D. Cohen paid to the pornographic film actress Stephanie Clifford to keep quiet about an alleged affair with Mr. Trump before he became president. That payment to Ms. Clifford, known professionally as Stormy Daniels, was a mere 0.005% of the $2.4 billion spent on the 2016 election. But it could have an outsized impact on the presidency. The payment has helped spur a lawsuit by Ms. Clifford against Mr. Trump and a federal investigation into Mr. Cohen. Campaign finance watchdogs assert the transaction was the result of a secret and illegal effort to subvert election spending laws on behalf of the president. Mr. Trump on Thursday rejected any notion that payments to Ms. Clifford had violated campaign finance laws, though in the course of his defense he contradicted earlier statements that he hadn't known of payments to the actress. The story behind the payment to Ms. Clifford, when Mr. Cohen paid it, how he paid it, whether he was paid back and by whom, will be critical to both the lawsuit and investigation, not to mention others that may come. Below is what we know about what happened, how the explanations have evolved, and why it all matters. Mr. Cohen sets up a new company in Delaware, Essential Consultants LLC, from which he will later pay Ms. Clifford. Delaware has minimal disclosure requirements for people who create companies there, making it hard to know their identities. Many companies incorporate in Delaware. The location of Essential Consultants could become legally significant if investigators establish that Mr. Cohen used Essential Consultants to evade campaign finance laws requiring full disclosure of campaign donations and disbursements. Mr. Cohen and lawyers for Mr. Trump have denied wrongdoing. Money is moved and aliases are involved. October 26, 2016. Mr. Cohen communicates with his bank, First Republic Bank, about a payment to Ms. Clifford through his Trump Organization email account. Ms. Clifford's lawyer Michael Avenatti has pointed to Mr. Cohen's use of that account to argue he was working on the payment in his official capacity working for the Trump Organization. Mr. Cohen has said that neither the Trump Organization nor the Trump campaign was a party to the transaction. October 27, 2016. Keith Davidson, then Ms. Clifford's lawyer, receives a $130,000 wire transfer in his client trust account at City National Bank in Los Angeles. October 28, 2016. Mr. Cohen and Ms. Clifford sign a contract that effectively promises Ms. Clifford money in exchange for not talking about the alleged affair with Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump's name does not technically appear on the document. According to a draft amendment to the original contract, which was shared with the New York Times, Ms. Clifford was referred to as Peggy Peterson. Mr. Trump was named as David Dennison in the document. Mr. Avenatti now contends that in failing to sign the document himself, Mr. Trump rendered the contract null and void. A close call just before the election. Nov. 4, 2016. The Wall Street Journal publishes an article about a $150,000 deal between the tabloid company American Media and another woman alleging an affair with Mr. Trump, the former Playboy model Karen McDougal, to keep silent during the campaign. That article makes glancing mention of Ms. Clifford, reporting that she was considering sharing her story with ABC News but abruptly disappeared on the network before doing so. The election is held 4 days later. The story about Ms. Clifford's payment does not get any real attention for another 14 months. The secret deal is secret no more. Jan. 12, 2018. News reports reveal that Mr. Cohen arranged the deal to pay Ms. Clifford $130,000 during the campaign and that a contract amendment identifies Ms. Clifford as Peggy Peterson and Mr. Trump as David Dennison. Mr. Cohen responds in a statement, "These rumors have circulated time and again since 2011. President Trump once again vehemently denies any such occurrence as has Ms. Daniels and forwards a denial from Ms. Clifford." A White House official says these are old, recycled reports which were published and strongly denied before the election. February 13, 2018. Mr. Cohen tells The Times that he paid the $130,000 to Ms. Clifford out of his own pocket, adding that neither the Trump Organization nor the Trump campaign reimbursed him. The implication? Mr. Cohen struck the deal with Ms. Clifford on his own and without the knowledge of the president. The watchdog group Common Cause alleges that Mr. Cohen's payment was in effect a campaign contribution made to help protect Mr. Trump from negative news toward the end of his campaign. Individual donations to candidates were limited to $5,400 per election cycle in 2016. March 6, 2018. Ms. Clifford files a lawsuit and reveals that Mr. Cohen took her to arbitration to secure a restraining order to silence her, which her lawyer declares invalid because Mr. Trump never signed the contract. March 7, 2018. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, says there was no knowledge of any payments from the president, adding, "I've had conversations with the president about this." She says he has denied all these allegations. Cohen, the secret payment was from a home loan. March 9, 2018. Mr. Cohen provides a detailed account of the payment to Ms. Clifford, describing where the money used for the payment came from. "The funds were taken from my home equity line and transferred internally to my LLC account in the same bank," he said. Mr. Cohen repeats his statement that he was not reimbursed by either the Trump Organization or the Trump campaign. Trump denies knowing about the payment. "You'll have to ask Michael Cohen." April 5, 2018. Reporters on Air Force One ask Mr. Trump if he knew about the payment to Ms. Clifford. He responds flatly, "No." Asked why Mr. Cohen made the payment, Mr. Trump says, "You'll have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael is my attorney." He says he does not know where the money for the payment came from. Trump reverses his stance. April 26, 2018. Mr. Trump, in an interview on Fox and Friends, acknowledges knowing that Mr. Cohen represented him in dealing with Ms. Clifford. "He represents me, like with this crazy Stormy Daniels deal, he represented me," he said. May 2, 2018. Mr. Trump's new lawyer, former Mayor Rudolph W. Giuliani of New York, tells Sean Hannity of Fox News that the president repaid it, referring to the payment Mr. Cohen made to Ms. Clifford. In fact, he says, they set up a reimbursement, $35,000 a month. Those payments, he says later in interviews, started in early 2017 and ultimately added up to as much as $470,000, which included incidental expenses. In a tweet the next morning, Mr. Trump acknowledges paying Mr. Cohen a monthly retainer. He reiterates that the retainer had nothing to do with his campaign